Imagine not having a mouth or a stomach and never eating for your entire life. That's what it's like for a mayfly. In fact, most mayfly species live between about 2 hours and 2 days, and they don't have a mouth or a stomach because they don't eat. They basically just find a mate, reproduce, and die afterwards. And I think it's so interesting to think about lifespan because I think the average human lifespan now is maybe around like 75 years or so, give or take. And so it's hard for us to imagine a different lifespan because it's so obvious to us, like we're born and then we have like the terrible twos and we're toddlers, and first we're infants and toddlers, then we're children, then we're teenagers, then we're supposedly adults. I don't know when that actually kicks in, but at some point we become adults between like 18 and 25, let's say. And maybe our brains are fully formed around 25 or so. So we could say we're adults then. And then most of us, if you avoid accidents and tragic circumstances, tend to live about 75 years or so. And some people have lived a little bit over 100 years. So that's kind of the average experience of life as a human being. And other animals have a wildly varied kind of life. I mean, like some animals just kind of leave their kids and walk away as soon as they're born. Or they don't ever meet their kids. They're just kind of fertilized somewhere else and they're just hanging out over there. And basically those insects or animals or lizards or whatever are adults right away. So they don't have that concept of childhood. That's such a long-term thing for us. And so it's really interesting to think about different lifespans. And I think they found a species of shark or whale or something like that that's been alive for over 400 years now. So that's kind of on one end. Maybe there's even an older one. I'm not sure, probably. And then on this end, the mayfly doesn't even have a mouth or a stomach because it doesn't live long enough to need to eat. That's incredible. Now, of course, a mayfly spends about a year as a nymph, which is kind of like the pre-mayfly stage, kind of like a caterpillar becomes a butterfly. So for a year, it does actually eat and grow and stuff like that, and it kind of hangs out in fresh water, but it doesn't really do anything. However, once it actually becomes a mayfly or the adult stage, that only lasts for a couple hours to 2 days, and they don't even eat. And I don't know if that's like a nirvana or a blissful life, because you never have to worry about eating anything or your next meal, where that's going to come from, or if that's really tragic. I'm not actually sure which way to look at it. Maybe it is both. Maybe there's pluses and minuses to everything, and not everything is as black and white as we like to think it is. So let's take a look at this article from reference.com because I think it's hilarious. It's the shortest article I'm ever going to feature probably here on JimTV, but it basically says, what do mayflies eat? I asked that as a search query the other day and this came out. It's really funny, so I want to read it for you. It says, what do mayflies eat? And the answer is, adult mayflies don't eat. Their lifespans range from a few hours to 2 days, and their only purpose is to reproduce. After this, they die. That's the entire article from reference.com about mayflies. And I think, again, that could be comic or tragic, depending on how you look at it. It's really interesting. And then How Stuff Works actually has a really cool article about mayflies that I want to read from a little bit for you because it's interesting. So first of all, mayfly actually is Greek for short-lived with wings. However, no matter how brief their lives appear, like an iceberg, most of their lifespan happens under the surface of the water. Mayflies are common in almost any standing or running body of fresh water, where most of their lives are spent as larvae, growing bigger, shredding their skin over and over as they grow. A lot of species live in their larval stages for over a year, about as long as your average house mouse, which isn't a heroically long time by human standards, but it's more than just the few hours mayflies are generally given credit for. So they actually live for about a year in a nymph stage, and then once they transition to an adult mayfly, that's when their lifespan of a couple hours to 2 days actually kicks in. So do they actually live for a day or two? Well, it depends on what you mean by being alive. The actual adult stage is only that long. So if you talk about the life of a butterfly, that's kind of the adult stage of what a caterpillar was before. So you could say a caterpillar lives this long, a butterfly lives this long. But if it's the same thing the whole time, if it's the same insect, then you can put the lifespans together. So I guess it depends on how you look at it. But here's the really cool part. The most ancient living insects. I didn't know this before. Mayflies are the oldest living group of winged insects, dating back to the Carboniferous period about 300 million years ago. They have evolved to be specially adapted for life in water during their nymph stages and to be specially adapted for rapid and efficient reproduction. So, this mayfly is one of the oldest creatures on Earth. They existed 300 million years ago. So, this way of life must work in terms of evolution and survival. And this is the thing that I think a lot of people don't think about too often because it's kind of hard to think about as a human because we're biased towards ourselves. But we tend to think, most of us anyway, that kind of our intelligence is a good thing and that it separates us from other animals and maybe even makes us better from the natural world, or what we call the natural world, because we're part of it, in my opinion. Everything we do is natural because we're part of the natural world. But anyway, I think we tend to think that these intelligent brains in the prefrontal cortex, being able to visualize the future and create things out of nothing, makes us special and it makes us better. And in some ways, you can argue that. It definitely does. I think that's partially true. However, that's not the only way to survive, and it's probably not even the best way. Yes, our intelligence allows us to survive in a lot of different environments on Earth, and maybe even beyond. Maybe we can live on Mars and on other planets around other stars and all over the universe, and maybe even in the multiverse if there's more than one universe. So maybe our intelligence does allow us to survive in a lot of environments. However, our brains with these beautiful prefrontal cortexes are extremely expensive. We have to eat a lot of calories just to maintain that energy that's used by our prefrontal cortex and by our brain. I think it's like 40% of our energy consumption. Maybe if it's even higher than that. You have to look it up, I'm not sure. So it's expensive, and it affects the way that the female body is, because even though our brain isn't fully formed in the womb, our heads are big and it's really hard to get that out. So like female hips are a little wider than they should be for walking because we have to cram out these giant human heads of ours. So it's not all rainbows and butterflies, for lack of a better word, to have this big brain. There's a big cost with it as well. And it's so interesting that people don't, I think of bacteria as the rulers of the world. They can live in those extremely hot spouts in the middle of the ocean that we can't obviously live in. They can eat different chemicals that are extremely toxic to us. They can kill us. They're part of our bodies in our gut and all over our bodies. You know, I think we actually have more bacterial cells than human cells in our bodies. And bacteria has been around a lot longer than us, and they're probably going to be around a lot longer after us. And I think that when we're looking at life and how to survive, it seems like bacteria, viruses, things that we can't see, actually have it kind of figured out, even though they're not figuring anything out, more than we do. They're going to survive better than us. So maybe they're in charge a little bit more. I mean, we had COVID-19 this last year and a half or 2 years, and it's been really challenging for us. And a little bit harsher virus could technically wipe us all out. So who's really in charge? Who's really the king of survival here? It's probably not us. It's probably bacteria, viruses, and these little microorganisms that can survive in extreme environments that we can't. And so I think that kind of perspective shift is interesting, and it also applies to the mayfly. Because while it doesn't have what we call like a full life of like eating things and self-discovery and all that kind of stuff and living for longer than a couple of days, while it doesn't enjoy that, it's also been around for 300 million years, which dwarfs how long we've been around, and honestly probably dwarfs how long we will be around, unless of course we expand and live in other places in the universe, which we probably will, so who knows. But all I'm saying is that there's more than one way to survive, and intelligence is only one path, and it's extremely expensive, and probably not the actual best way. And maybe the mayflies have it figured out more than we do. I'm not sure. Either way, I post a new video like this every single day at 7 a.m. Eastern Time. So I hope to see you in the next video as well. Just go ahead and hit subscribe so that YouTube notifies you when that next video is available, and we can talk then. And even if you don't decide to join me for any more videos, I really hoped you enjoyed this one. I know that our lives are a little longer than mayflies, but we shouldn't put them down. We don't really know what's best, in my opinion. And with that thought, I will talk to you later.